There we go.
Welcome to Between the Lines, the YouTube channel where two best-selling authors talk about their writing life, behind the scenes, what they're doing, how they are making their full-time writing career go forward. I'm Devon Monk.
And I'm Diana Farrow Francis.
And today we're going to talk about what happens when you get knocked off of your creative path or your creative goals, and how do you get back on that path again. Basically, right?
Jump on the horse. What are
Get
all
back
the
on the
phrases,
horse.
right?
That's right. That's right. So
Get back into the groove.
Yeah. So we thought we'd first start talking about how one might get knocked off their creative goals, or how you get off track. So, Di, do you want to suggest some ideas of ways that you've been knocked off track?
Oh, goodness. A lot of different ways, right? And I say we go back and forth because there's so many. We will just, yeah. All right. So first, I think one of the earliest ways that I got knocked off was writing the second book, right? In a series, the follow-up after the first one's been bought or published, or even after you've just completed it and you want to write more, you can get stuck because you think, can I even do this? What do I do? All of that kind of thing. So I think that often is a stuck point. It was a stuck point. It was frequently a stuck point for me, repeatedly doing the second book or the third book or the fourth book. So that is definitely one way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's always been more life schedule interruptions. So births in the family, like my kids, love them, but it changes your time, or a job changes. I worked full time for a lot of my life and then fit writing in part time, and then I won't go into all that, but like job changes can definitely knock you off of your creative goals. When other people around you have big changes, so like luckily we haven't had like big moves, but like if a spouse needs to move for a job or for some sort of reason, or if a family member needs more help, like caring for an elder family member, that's gonna knock you off of your creative groove, because it's time being moved from where you had it allotted to somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and you've had a lot. We've both had a lot of that, because with my mom, my father-in-law, my dad's death, my son getting sick, my daughter having being diagnosed late with autism, all of those things. Yeah, and you've got a lot of that on your plate as well.
Yep, and medical things. I think that's a good way to kind of segue into that. It can be your own health that changes, or your a family member's health or a friend's health that time needs to go toward that.
And it's never planned, right? Because it's always medical stuff doesn't say, "Excuse me, you're going to have a medical emergency in 2 months. Please plan for that."
Right, exactly. You can't really put it on the calendar. You can, like a surgery. Let's say, okay, I know I'm going to have a surgery, and put that on the calendar. But then a surgery can knock you off your feet too, because
far more than you planned for.
Far more than you plan for. You're like, well, I'll just snap right out of it, or I'll give myself this many weeks and then I'll be fine. And there's no certainty in that. Things change.
When I had my when I had my last back surgery, which was a number of years ago, before that, they had to put me on this enormous cocktail of drugs just to keep me comfortable enough to wait out the period before I had the surgery. And the only reason we had to wait that out was because they had to get me off of a blood thinner I was on. So I was on this robust cocktail of, I think it was Valium and Robaxin and Hydra.
A lot of things.
Yeah, there was five. There was five things I was on, including gabapentin, and then there was a narcotic. And they allowed me to sleep periodically and kept me from screaming in pain. And then I had the surgery, and after the surgery, for something like 3 months, I was almost non-functional, because I would have what I called coma sleeps, where I would literally fall asleep for 3 hours, wake up for a little bit, fall asleep for another 3 hours. And I just kept doing that. And it took a long time to not be doing that. And in that time, I was not very productive,
right?
Because my brain wasn't working. I wasn't writing. It just, nothing was coming together.
Yeah. And, we see lots of sicknesses can do that, not just surgeries, but you can get a sickness. Hormonal changes can do that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? And with hormonal changes, like mood can throw you off of your creative goals too. You can just not be in the mood for it, or just not have that emotional or mental depth to be able to apply yourself to it, right? So it can also just be your mood that sets you off.
And a lot of this doesn't happen by itself. Like, it's a combination thing. Like, you have this going on, plus you have this going on, plus you have this going on, and you got to keep all the balls in the air. And oh, by the way, regular life goes on.
Right. And even when, like right now, I'm not full-time writing because I am doing some family member care, and that's taking part of my time. My time is allocated to that. So even if when you're a full-time writer, which I have done full-time career writing, even then it doesn't feel like you have all the time that you need to be in the perfect mood to do the perfect thing to get that creative goal exactly how you want it to go. Like, even when it all seems fine, when you haven't done surgery, your hormones are great, nobody in your family needs you for anything, there's still things that will nibble away at your ability to get your creative goals done. And the good thing about all of these things that we're listing, which are all pretty dire here, but the good thing about it is that these are all really common human experiences, and we all go through this. The most famous person who a writer, let's say, or artist, absolutely has this happen to them, and the person who you've never heard of has this happen to them, and we all go through this, right?
And another thing that then happens, I think I want to mention this before we even move into anything else, is the other thing that happens when that starts to happen is, I think there's a part of you that starts to try to cram as much writing or writing related things into all your spare minutes and time and tuck it in everywhere, so that you don't, in order to do it because you love it, because you want to do it, because it's your career. And then what happens is you can burn out because you're not taking time off, because you're feeling this need to tuck it into all the empty spaces that you have. So you end up doing all of the other stuff, which is draining. And then you tuck in all your writing, it feeds you, but it's also draining, and you need to refill the well at some point. And what happens is all of your time, none of your time ends up going to refilling the well. You don't relax. You don't take time for yourself, and that leads to burnout or overwhelm, and that's a huge one, because I think with all of these things we talked about, those two things crop up a lot in combination with everything we've been talking about.
Well, and I think that's really kind of segueing into the tips and tricks, right? Like, how do you continue? Because what we're talking about at the beginning there is like, what knocks you off, And so, yeah, burnout is what you're just bringing up, can absolutely knock you off, or being overwhelmed. So writing too much or creating too much can actually knock you off of your creating, which is bonkos, but there you go.
But I think part of that is that you feel like you're not doing enough. And so even though you're cramming it in there, you're sitting there going, oh, it's not enough. It's not enough. I should be. And it's never enough.
So now what you're talking about is, what are your expectations? And that was the second part that we were going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about kind of what can knock you off your stride. And then we're going to talk about what expectations have you set for yourself? Because most creative goals are set by the creator. There are the times when those goals, those deadlines or whatever, are set by an outside party, so a publisher, or an editor or whatever.
Right.
But most of the goals are going to be, the timing of when things are going to happen is going to be set by the creator. And what you are saying is, expectation is going to be a thing that needs to be managed, because you were talking about the shoulds, right? I should write in every single spare moment I have. And earlier you were talking, before we started this little talk, you were talking to me about some other shoulds that you run into. Do you want to go through some of those?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this one nags at me, and it bothers me because I don't own this. This isn't mine. I don't know where I know what I picked it up on from society and all of that kind of stuff, but that house should be clean. If you see dust, it should be clean. There shouldn't be dust. There shouldn't be stuff on the floor. There should be clutter. You should be picked up. Your bed should be made. Your bathroom needs to be cleaned super like on this schedule, and your sheets need to be changed on this schedule, and all the laundry has to be done and folded, and etc. And yes, I do have a very helpful spouse, and my daughter does a lot of chores, but I have this sense of things should be more than they do, right? So that's another thing. There's this misplaced expectation that doesn't meet theirs. But then I've tried to let that go, but it's still there. And like I said, I don't own that. I don't know. I mean, I know in some cases it came from my mom, but it also comes from, just social expectation for what a proper house should look like, right? Mine is kind of messy. It's going to stay messy because I don't like a lot of clutter, but I also don't want to take the time to polish and clean and get into all the cracks and corners because I would rather be writing.
So yeah, societal expectations. So, that's, you're talking about if you are the creative, sometimes you're also the person who is handling the other load of life stuff. Laundry, right, yeah. Cleaning, cooking, appointments, all of those things, right? And from a woman's perspective, that often falls on the woman in the relationship. There's no reason for it to, but it often does. But sometimes it falls on the man in the relationship too, and they get saddled with all of those tasks and chores and duties. And so I would say absolutely the shoulds of like, I should have a house that looks this way. My perception of that at my advanced age is you should be comfortable in your house.
Right.
And
yeah.
that's whatever that is for you, whatever comfortable is. And that's my main goal. I keep it.
But for me, there's that underlying nagging pecking of the kind of we would call it the editorial voice when it comes to self or criticism of our stuff. But it's like, still it's there. It's like, how can you stand to let that be? Or how come you haven't done that yet? Or whatever. And
yeah, don't worry about that.
And you have I think one of the keys we'll have to talk about is how do you shut off that noise, because it's noise that's there, and it's not just that kind of should, it's all the shoulds that other people that we internalize that don't necessarily come from us, but we have internalized them, and we think, because this is one of mine. But I have more shoulds, right? You should do this. You should do that. You should be out doing this. You should be doing that. You should, why aren't you doing more in that direction? And we have to turn that noise off consciously. And it's not that easy to do. But you have been doing a thing lately where you've been able to, because you've been crammed in, you've been able to just turn that off in your head and tell yourself no.
I'm doing a lot of gut checks. So what I'm doing is if I'm like, you should do laundry, I'd be like, should I? Is that the best thing I can do right now, this moment? Can laundry wait for a couple of hours? Can it wait for a couple of days? And then I'm like, yeah, it can wait for a couple of days. I'm like, good, that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of gut checks. So when I hear you should, whatever, I'm like, should I? And sometimes the answer is yes, you should absolutely take that, spoiled vegetables out of the vegetable bin because, oh my God, the smell.
Right.
But there are a lot of times where it's like, no, that isn't something I need to do right now. So it's definitely a stop as soon as I hear should, and asking myself that question, is that really a should? And then
exactly.
I can go forward.
Is that my should, or is that somebody else's should?
Or is it just like literally, sure, you should take the rotten vegetables out of the vegetable drawer? And there have been moments when I've been like, yes, I need to do that. That's not happening right now. I've got to do this other thing first, and that's just how it's going to be. And if I get to it tonight, I will. And it's literally just taking the good and bad off of it. That's the thing.
And I think the other thing is that a lot of this stuff that the shoulds end up feeling like they take priority because they feel more urgent than they are. And that's one of the things you're saying is this stuff really isn't as urgent as you think. So you can take the time and say, I'll do it when I do it. Or there's a time I'm going to set aside to do some of these things. but I'm not going to let that impinge on this time, which has to be for this.
Right. And I'm going to say something. Brains are really tricky, and they will tell you important things that you must do right now that are absolutely not important things that you must do right now. Mostly to get away from the really important things that you must do right now. So, because like you were talking about, I'm on a more constrained amount of time for writing. Right. I really have to question that, because my brain will tell me that, yeah, dusting is super, super important and you need to go dust everything right now, instead of write. And that's not how my career is going to go forward. Nobody's going to care if my house is dusted, and I'm not going to get the satisfaction out of dusting that I would, other than getting away from writing, that I would if I had just sat down and written like 10 words. That would make me feel much happier, right? So I'm leaning towards happy. And for me right now, happy means making words. It doesn't mean there's no effort. It just means that makes me happy.
And sometimes breaking through the hard parts in the writing can be one of those things that send you, like you say, send you off to do other things, because it feels painful, it feels hard, and sometimes our wealth of stamina is fatigued, and we just like, I don't feel like fighting this fight right now, so I'm going to take the easy path. And the easy path isn't necessarily the easy path, but the cleaning or the whatever can be easy because you know what to do. You know when you're done. You have something visible to usually show for it. Like if you go, I have to go grocery shopping. I'm going to go buy my groceries. I'm going to come back. Yeah, that doesn't take a lot of time. And yes, you needed to do it, but you could have done it later and done your writing first. But you didn't, because that writing at that time was causing you that pain of forcing yourself to go through it, and it's painful sometimes.
Yeah. I have a real tell that when I'm writing a book and it's somewhere about 3/4 of the way done and things are a little complicated because I've laid down plot lines and I'm trying to tie up plot lines and I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm going to just get them all straightened out and whatnot, I will always start baking. And it's hilarious because I'm like, why am I standing here making a cake, right? And it's never like, oh, I'm just throwing something out of a box into a bowl. I'm like starting from scratch. And I know why, because I've stopped and asked myself, why are you standing here making a cake? And the reason is because there's a recipe, and the recipe has step 1, step 2, and step 3. And that's what I'm craving for my books. An easy step 1, step 2, step 3 that will tell me how to get through this. And so when I'm trying to find those steps, my mind's like, I know what does that. Go make brownies, And so then I'm in there doing these steps that will absolutely turn out perfectly because I'll have this delicious dessert by the end of it. And when that happens to me, I recognize it. I'm like, oh, we're doing this baking thing because we can't figure out the plotting over here. Let's throw this in the oven because we're halfway through anyway, and sit down and do some, just brainstorming and kind of working it out. But it's literally a physical, I will find myself in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, I see where we are right now.
Plus you have the reward at the end of it of getting the dopamine hit from what you baked.
And the house smells good and it's so nice.
Right? And the family comes home and goes, oh, this is so amazing. Nice. And so there's some praise going on there. Right?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that though, because yesterday I hit this spot in the novel where I was wrestling it for a really long time, and it was no good reason to wrestle it. It was one of those slow places that you just kind of have to move past, and I don't know why I couldn't figure my way through it. But finally, shortly before my husband comes home from work, he works 3 12-hour days, so I'm supposed to have dinner going and stuff like that, and I didn't, because all of a sudden it hit me, and I'm writing really fast, and the words are just coming out, and he gets home, and I'm still writing, and I'm like, crap, we're ordering something, because I'm in the groove all of a sudden that I couldn't find earlier, and I want to keep it as long as possible. So that, I guess my point is that pushing through can lead to good things.
Absolutely.
If
almost always.
you're willing.
Yeah. That's kind of the hard thing. It's like, what is it? The last 5% of a project is as hard or harder than the other 95% of a project. And if you've ever done house remodels or anything like that, it's true.
Yeah.
So that pushing through to get to the good stuff on the other side is absolutely a thing to do in writing. So one of the things that I thought I would lead us toward is some tips. So we've gotten knocked off of our writing goals by whatever, any of the circumstances that we talked about or any other ones that crop up. What are ways to get back to it. So what you were just talking about is sit with it, right? Be there, be in this place, have your manuscript open, and even if you're not writing, sit there with it, right?
Right, and don't go off onto other websites, and don't go distracting yourself with your phone or anything else.
Do you look back through what you've already written, or do you look at your notes when you sit there with it, or?
I will, yes, I will read back some of what I've written. I will read back on the major plot points leading up into this moment. I will brainstorm sometimes. I have the other day I was doing exactly that, the brainstorm through what I needed to do. And sometimes it's really hard to sit with it because, yeah, your urge is, oh, well, I'll just check my mail. I'll just check this website and see what's going on. But you really can't. That sitting with it is painful but important.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things that I think both you and I do is when I'm writing, I'm on the computer and I'm typing into the computer, but when I'm brainstorming and outlining or any of that kind of stuff, it's pen and paper or pencil and paper. Like there's a different thought process. You slow down, and they've actually done studies. There's a different thought process for how your mind works when you're writing on paper as opposed to how your mind works when you're writing on a computer. So I would recommend that as a tip to be tried. If you're stuck in a spot, start writing down possible ways out of it. Like one of the things I'll do is I'll say, I need to come up with 10 ideas for how to get out of this scene. And I'll just write, okay, we're going to go to the car. We're going to have the phone call. We're going to, somebody's going to show up in the room. Like I just start writing down 10 ideas for how to get out of the scene. And eventually one of those I'll be like, yeah, that's good enough. I'll go with that one and see where it goes. And, but by hand on it, typing it in the computer doesn't give me the same result. It has to be pen and paper or pencil and paper. So, changing your medium can help, right? So going from writing on the computer to maybe writing longhand. I know a lot of writers who actually write their books longhand and then transcribe it or, type it back into the computer. So different ways of writing. There's also that little, there's one that used to be called the Alpha Smart machine, which is, it's a little screen that only shows like 2 sentences or 3 sentences at a time, so you can't go back and look at all of your work and worry about it.
They still make some new versions of that in various people make those and we have friends that do write on those. That would drive me insane.
I couldn't do it, but I do space on my word processor. I do space my my document in single space. I don't write in double space, which is
same.
Yeah. That's standard submission format back in the day. I suppose it still is if anybody submits, is double spaced. But I write single spaced because I want to see more of my story on screen at a time, right?
Same. So I've done that. Here's the weird part after all we've talked about though. Sometimes when you're sitting with it and you can also get up and do things that are rote. That like cleaning something or gardening and let your hands be doing something while your mind is working on it. The key is to let your mind or keep your mind focused on the problem at hand instead of letting it go off in another direction. So you can try it. I mean, you could try it. You can say for the next 15 minutes, I am going to go clean this, or I am going to go plant this, or I am going to go do this task that doesn't require a lot of thought while I let my brain fiddle with it and see what comes up. The key with that is don't just let yourself keep using that as a avoidance tactic, but really use that as a way back into the novel tactic.
Right. And I know there's a lot of people who say doing dishes works for them, doesn't work for me. Gardening works for them, doesn't work for me. Taking a walk doesn't work for me. But it works for other people. Taking a drive doesn't work for me.
Taking a shower?
Taking a shower absolutely works for me. I come up with so many plot solutions in the shower. So if I have the time, I'll hop up in the shower in the middle of the day after I've already had a shower. And it is amazing what I can get untangled in a shower going through the whole novel. And the other thing that works for me is staring at the sky, which is dumb, but laying down, staring out one of my windows, or even sitting and staring out one of my windows at the sky, at the clouds very slowly moving, that will get me into that internal thought process where I will be able to work my way through. So those are my two kind of have always worked for my entire career. Shower, because there's something about being in a small enclosed space where you can't do anything else but be in the shower. You can't do anything for anybody. You're not going to answer your phone. You know, nothing else is happening but you in that small space where you have to, where it gives you the permission maybe to really sink into your subconscious and pull those conscious thoughts forward.
Plus, I think the water, the flow of water, the water on skin is, it's a relaxing thing. It's an invigorating thing. It's a rejuvenating thing in so many ways. And yeah, I think just the water and sounds and all of that really is helpful.
Yeah. And I think it's why a lot of writers say classic writers like Bradbury and some of those say that they just rolled out of the bed and basically put a vomit draft. Like they literally roll out of their bed and onto their typewriter or their computer, because you're still in that kind of subconscious access space where you haven't already thought, oh, I need to pay bills, I need to blah, 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 or whatever. You're not already picking up the conscious world and dealing with all of those chores. You're just rolling right out of that, dreamish state and getting right into the writing state. And it just creates that flow, that state of flow.
Before all the shoulds hit.
Yeah, before just everything, right?
The day's shoulds, I should say.
Right. So one of the things, I wrote down a little list here of maybe tricks that we can discuss. So let's say we've been knocked off of our creative goals. We were going to do this thing. We are not getting that thing done. So now we realize that we've realized that we aren't doing our goal. Because that's a step, like knowing that, oh, I'm not actually doing the thing that I thought I would do, right? Because sometimes
acknowledging it and not pretending and pushing against something that isn't working.
Right. And I think in acknowledging it, there is, for me, I have to have a little time to grieve. I have to be sad that it isn't working out the way I want, or angry it isn't working out the way that I want, or annoyed, whatever. Right. I have to take a little moment to be like, I don't like this. And yeah, and I'm mad about it, or I'm sad about it, or whatever. It's not going how I want it to go. Boo, and I need to take a moment to say, yeah, it's not going the way I want it to go.
Right.
Because until I can acknowledge that and process that, I can't get to the, okay, so how are we going to make it go? Right. So there's that. Right. So, then after that step, the next thing I do is I take a look at my life and I'm like, where's my time going? What are the things that absolutely I can't cut out of my time? Like, let's say sleeping or, food, because you cut too much sleep out of your life and you're not going to be writing either.
Right, exactly. Oh, so much.
Right. But could I add it into my lunch time? Could I put writing time into my lunchtime, and only then to make it a small little piece of writing instead of trying to do a whole bunch of writing during the day. Right. So I look at my day and it's what time is available? When am I available? When do I have the energy for it?
And for me, sometimes, again, I run into the potential for overwhelm, because I did exactly that. I was looking at my life and I wrote myself a little schedule last week because I was running into problems. Here's my little schedule that I wrote up. And first day in, and I realized, oh no, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can feel the feeling come up on me. I can feel it just, and again, same thing. Stop. Start thinking, okay, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah,
what did I schedule? How did this become this way so fast when I was going to help myself?
Right. Well, and the question is, what am I overwhelmed by? The idea that I have a lot to do, or do I think I'm going to fail? Because that's always there. Do I think I made this schedule and there's no way I'm going to hit it, and then I'm going to feel bad about myself and I'm going to fall back down in another hole or something? What's the overwhelm? What is making you feel overwhelmed?
Exactly. And part of it is, for me, is what I realized was I had not built in the downtime. I kind of had, but I had not, because I get into the habit of working 7 days a week. just doing it. And yeah, sometimes I take a time off in the middle for doing something, but typically I will do some kind of writing work 7 days a week all the time. And this is not healthy. And so I had to tell myself, you need to not only schedule, but actually do it, the time off. And time off to do something else creative, or just to be vegetable matter or whatever. And that is one of my real sticking points in my life. I just have a real hard time with that.
When I had full-time writing time, I would write 7 days a week. And then after, I don't know, 15 years of that, I decided that I should not do that and I should take weekends off. And I had a couple of years where I did that. I would write 5 days a week and take the weekends off, more or less. Sometimes I'd have to do a thing on the weekend just because of deadlines.
Right, yeah.
But, more or less I did that. And I liked that schedule a lot. That was really nice. The way that my life is right now, I'm doing one or the other job 7 days a week. So I don't have a day off during the week. And that's going to be that way for a few years for me, as far as I can tell. So, I'm having to make sure that I watch my sleep schedule. That's really where my downtime is I have to make sure I get sleep to fuel these working hours. So sleep hygiene, good.
And for me, one of the things is that, okay, if I am going to work 7 days, the time that I choose to have downtime, like if I'm going to say I'm not going to work in the evenings, then I need to not only not work in the evenings, but I need to not think about or tell myself that I should be working. I have to do something enjoyable or be in the moment.
Right.
And that's my hard part. Be in that moment and just, take the time to let your mind and body relax.
Yeah, and I think what works for me in that is if I hit my goals, if I actually get my writing done, then I don't have to worry about it at night. It's done. It's done. And then the next day that I am writing, if I hit my goals, then I don't have to worry about it, right? Like for me, and this is just how my brain's set up. If I hit my goals, because I do set schedules, and if I hit my scheduled goals, then all the rest of the you should, this must, all that stuff is not even something that I have to worry about, because I know that I'm on schedule.
And see, my problem is I will set a goal and I'll hit it, but then I think I should keep working. And because I've never done a good job of assigning myself a task, doing it, and then not feeling I needed to keep going on to the next one. And this goes toward, I think, a lot of times when we hit a milestone or we publish a book, we don't take a moment to celebrate it or to acknowledge it. And we tend to go, okay, what's the next thing? Keep going. And, when you go to a regular job, you have tasks, it's all left there between those hours, and you accomplish those things during that time. And when you leave, you let yourself off the hook. And my problem, I don't know if it's everybody's problem, but for me, I've had a hard time saying that's the end of the workday. Done, move on, because I've always worked all the time. And that has to do with trying to fit in a full-time writing career around a job and around all of this other stuff that has cropped up over the past 10 years for me.
And I will also say, and this is kind of a weird counterintuitive thing, when you have more available time to write, it feels like you should be writing constantly to fill that time. When you have less available time to write, like some days I have, like Saturday, I had 3 hours. That was it. But I had to hit my word count goal in that time. No questions, because if I'm going to hit this schedule, this thing has to happen.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, I hit that in those 3 hours, because that was all the writing time I had that day. So if I had had 8 hours, there is no guarantee I would have gotten those words done. But if I had gotten those words done and still had more time, I would have been doing other things. And like you said, getting more done, but also getting worn out too, right? So I do think there is a value in setting very narrow writing times and putting them when you're at your freshest and your best generally, and hitting those and getting that done and out of the way before you move on to something else.
I think it's also, I was going to say, I think it's also valuable to say, this is the writing goal. I'm going to write 2,000 words today. And when I'm done, I am stopping, and to tell yourself, yes, that is what you're going to do.
But it's
otherwise
also
you can end up in burnout.
Right. But it's also valuable to say, I'm going to get that done by noon. Because if you say I have to write 2,000 words today, and you get up at 9 and you work on it until 10 o'clock at night and you get 1,100, 1,700 words or something, you don't quite hit that 2,000 goal. Then you look back and you're like, I spent how many hours and I still didn't get that done, right? So there is a value in saying like, this is my end of time, because then here's the thing. You got in the groove right when you knew you had to walk away from the computer when your husband came home, right? So like there's something our brain does, which is like sometimes you will get it done right at the very last second, right? It's that whole like, I'm going to write to deadline, but I'm not even going to start until the actual day of the deadline, right?
Do you know what I used to do in my PhD program? This is terrible. But something in my brain, I would have these long, complex papers I needed to write. And I would do the research and everything, but I wouldn't really start the writing until it felt ready in my brain. And it was like my mind knew exactly how much time before class was met that I had to start this to finish it in time, because I guess it knew I was my most creative and productive in that urgency time.
And there's a lot of writers who do that
all the time, and yet it was exhausting because it was such an adrenaline demanding sort of thing, and so I would rather not do it. But it should teach me the lesson that, okay, set those narrow times.
Well, and I think there are writers who actually do write, like I think Becca Sines calls it, is it the Phoenix writers, where they burn hot right up against deadlines and then they burn out and then they don't write for an extended amount of time, and then right as the deadline's coming up strong, they burn hot and get it done, and then they burn out and they don't do anything. And there are writers who run their careers that way. It's uncomfortable, but there's also an awful lot of writers who use the adrenaline of the panic monkey to actually get the writing done because the time has ticked out and they haven't been writing until the very last minute. And there are writers who run their careers doing that, making sure that they get the writing done, but only at the last minute and only on this adrenaline push, and only, the same thing you did with your dissertation. And I think it is a way that you can successfully write. If you know that that's the way you work, then you have to structure your life somehow that there are those hammer coming down deadlines, right? That, matter.
But when you're an independent writer and you don't, and those deadlines are set for yourself by yourself, if you don't make yourself accept those deadlines and make yourself hit those deadlines, then you don't. That won't work, because you say, oh, well, I can always change the deadline. I can always.
That's where you have to make yourself accountable by someone else makes you accountable. Somebody that will, either you lose something valuable to you, money, or there's carrot in the stick. So you could gain something valuable too if you get the deadline, right? But that's where one of the tips I was going to say is buddying up, finding another writer who is writing and, reaching out to them and talking with them and exchanging, like doing sprints, like we will check in sometimes.
I was going to say sprints too. And there's lots of groups now where you can join in and do sprints for 15 minutes, half hour. For me, an hour is not a sprint. For me, a half hour is the sprint time that I prefer, because it feels like a sprint. I can, adrenaline wise, I can maintain the energy for that long, take a break, do it again, but I need that kind of break in between for me to do it.
See,
but
and
it
I think
depends on the writer.
Yeah, that's reflecting your writing style, right? Where you say you like to write up against those short distances, short lines. Yeah, and I can, an hour sprint works fine for me, but in my sprint, I always think, what I'm actually sprinting for is 1,000 words in that hour, which is, depending on the book, I can pretty consistently write 1,000 words in 45 minutes. So that gives me 15 minutes of screwing around in that hour where I can go get coffee or, watch something on YouTube and then get back to the writing, but I have to watch it, so I do have flex in that hour. But, okay. So betting up in sprints is one. Another thing I want to say is, if you've been completely knocked off your creative goal, I would say there's two ways that I would start again. One is to start with the smallest thing you can do to feel like you succeeded in something. Come up with a title, just do the first paragraph, like the smallest thing you can do.
Even a sentence,
right?
Yeah.
Or start off with the easiest thing you can do. Maybe that means I'm going to rewrite this thing. I'm just going to go back and copy edit this one paragraph. Either of those things, either the smallest thing you can do or the easiest thing you can do, I think can get your juices flowing again, so you can start getting back into that feeling of being in creative space again and of having productivity again, right?
And even before that, just opening the manuscript, sitting down and opening it can be huge, because a lot of times when you fall off the horse, it's so hard to go and do that, because it puts you in front, it confronts you with your failings, as it were. And I'm not saying people are failing, don't get that from me, but you feel like you're failing.
You're disappointed,
you're not
right?
doing it. Yeah, you're disappointed. And so just opening it, that's a triumph. That's just opening it. You can go, yeah, man, I did that.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, that really does help. And then you say, okay, well, while I'm here, why don't I just see if I can write one sentence. Yeah. And sometimes one sentence leads to two and then three, but sometimes it doesn't. But then you just say, okay, yay, I did that. I'm going to be back and open that tomorrow or later today or whatever.
Because those little wins add up, and you're like, I did that yesterday. I wrote a sentence. And the trick is not to be like, yeah, but I want to write a whole blah, blah, blah. It'd be like, no, we're starting over now. Like when I take that moment to look and say like, no, everything has changed and I need to change because life has changed or I've changed or whatever, then I look at my writing as I'm starting over with how I'm writing again. And I have started over with my writing again millions of times, hundreds of times in my career. Like, I know I say this, but every year for a couple of months I would quit writing, as in I would quit it as a career. I'd be like, I'm done. I am done with this baloney. I am no longer ever writing again. And it would happen every year for about a month, and then I'd be like, no, I'm going to try it again.
I miss it.
Yeah, I miss it. I have this idea. So, it's okay to start over and start over and start over. Really, that's what writing is. We are always beginning a new book or beginning a new chapter or beginning a new sentence. It's always beginning. And even when you get to the end of a book, let's say, you're beginning the end, right? So it's all about starting over and over and over.
And as you say, it's the wins, but it's also be kind to yourself. Be honest with yourself, and say, I am having a hard time with this, so that you know that sentence was a huge win.
Yep.
It was.
Yep.
And don't go at yourself with, well, you should have done more. No, that's a huge win. That was great.
Absolutely.
And having that sense of honesty, that you're in a place where just dipping your toe in the water is like huge, and be proud of that, I think is important.
Absolutely.
Because every little step forward that you take means you're going to make more steps forward, and you're taking charge, and you are owning your career, and you're doing it. And just because you're in a slump, as to use the sporting term for it, just because you're in a slump doesn't mean that slump has to last forever, and there are ways out of it. And honestly, another tip is talk to other writers, talk to writing coaches, talk to creatives about, watch this video, obviously, but look at ways to push forward. And you know what? The other thing is you can stop. I'm not saying quit. I'm saying you can take a vacation.
You can quit. Once a year, you can quit.
Yeah. You can take a vacation. You can take time away and just say, I need a reset. And I'm not going to feel guilty, and I'm not going to feel like I should do something. I'm just going to do some enjoyable stuff that makes me happy for a while. And however long that takes to make me feel good, that's what I'm going to do. And just let writing go for a while. Take a break.
Yep, absolutely.
That's perfectly good, and it's often helpful.
Yeah, when I was burning hard on deadlines, when I was doing, traditional book sales, or traditional book through traditional publishers, I was burning some pretty hard deadlines. And every once in a while, every few months, I'd sit on the couch and I'd look at my husband and I'd be like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I cannot get this written, and I have to get it written. I don't have any time. I'm running out of time. The words aren't coming, blah, 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 blah. And he'd look at me and he goes, you need to sleep. And I'd be like, no, I don't. He's like, you need to get some rest. You need to refresh. You need to refresh. And I'd be like, you're wrong. He was always, always, always right. If I would even take one extra long night or get a nap in during the day or take just a little time, and I didn't have any time. That was the problem, right? But if I would put some of that time towards moving away from the writing, it made coming back to the writing so much better, and I was able to, get it done and to do it. So he was always right with that. So yeah, there is value in just walking away from it and just not being involved with it for a while.
And as you know, I've had a lot of stuff going on with my father-in-law's death and everything. And so I have not been putting the writing in that I want for the past year or two. And at some point, I was okay with saying, it's the back burner right now because this other stuff is killing me. And I have to do it. I don't really have a choice. So it's draining me and it's overwhelming me and I'm struggling with this. And so I would write, but I wouldn't demand that I had to write. Writing became more of a kind of a escape again, if you will. And that, not putting pressure on myself to hit deadlines or to say I'm going to get this done by here, but just to say I'm just glad I'm showing up. Yep. Was huge for me, but to give myself permission to say, right now, this is what you can do. Do what you can do and be so happy that you were able to keep doing that. And I am so happy I was able to keep doing that. I'm kind of sad that I couldn't do more. I'm kind of sad that I was kind of on hiatus as far as the things that I wanted to get done. But now I'm regrouping and pulling myself together and getting back on it.
Yeah, and that's starting over again. This is how the writing career goes.
It's resilience. You got to be resilient if you can be.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes kind of, this is a little, maybe flipping the coin on the other head. Sometimes when I'm feeling out of energy and I don't feel like writing or whatever, I ask myself, you tell I talk to myself a lot. I ask myself, what would make me feel good? Would going out for a cup of coffee make me feel good? Would writing a sentence make me feel good because at least I got a sentence done? And I'd be like, yeah, writing a sentence would make me feel good. At the end of the day, I could look back and say, I wrote that sentence. And so sometimes, even if it isn't the fun thing, I know it's what I will feel the best about myself to have done during the day. I got that thing done, even when I wasn't feeling like it. Good job, me. I feel like a big pat on the back for that. So sometimes I will weigh it's always easy to say, well, what will make me feel good is, the real fun thing, going to a movie or I don't know, whatever it is, playing video games. But at the end of the day, am I going to be like, boy, I sure am glad I played that video game? Sometimes, yeah. But, at the end of the day, I am almost always very happy if I say, I wrote that sentence, right? Exactly, I'm happy I got to the writing. So, but that being said, because we were kind of talking about schedules and stuff, I don't write every day. That's not in my schedule right now. No, did you see me stop myself? I almost said I can't write every day. And why I didn't say that is because I could somehow shove it into every day. But what I know is it burns me out because I have to give up sleep and I can't, and I need to keep on my game basically. So I could write every day, but right now I am not writing every day. See me not use can't again, because again, I know I could, but so, knowing where you can put your writing and showing up for it, even if you don't get as much done as you want, but showing up for it. So knowing where you can put your art and showing up for it is really it's a skill and it's a muscle. You do it.
Yeah, exactly.
You build it by doing it, right?
And being honest with yourself and being forgiving of yourself.
Yes.
I sometimes think we hold ourselves to a higher standard than a boss would, right?
Yeah, I think the issue is as soon as you write and publish, you start seeing other writers publishing and you start comparing. You can look over at the road that they're driving and see what speed they're going at, right? And you're looking at your road and your little vehicle, like how fast am I going? And you feel like you should be doing it, there's that should word, the way somebody else is, right?
Exactly.
So, or
why can't I? why are they such faster writers than me? Why?
Right. And the healthiest thing to do is just do you, because none of us are ever going to be some other writer. I'm never going to be Nora Roberts. Never. If I tried with everything I had, every fiber in my being, I couldn't be her because I'm not her. Like, you know.
Exactly.
And our goal is to get the best of our stories, the best that we can create our stories out for people. And there's no rule for how quickly you have to put your stories out, and there's no rules for how quickly you have to write. I was just talking to one of my kids, and they were recently reading Jasper Fforde, which I read back in the day, loved his Thursday Next novels, and they were telling me that Jasper wrote a book, I can't remember what it was called, 10 years ago, and just came out with the sequel because of issues. And I'm like, wow, there's a 10-year gap, but you know, his fans are very excited to get it and stuff. So like, you can write at your speed and get stuff out at your speed, whatever that is.
Exactly. And yeah, it's the whole part about building career. That's a whole different topic separately, but focus on the writing. I mean, that is the career when you get right down to it. And it's funny because you said comparison is bad, and that's what has tattooed on the side of my arm, which is, so I can see it a lot. Comparison is the enemy of joy, right? And indeed it is. Indeed it is.
Right. Yeah, you know, and I think one of the things that we look for, and like you said, this is sort of another subject, so I'll get off of it here real quick. But we want to see samples or you know, other options. We want to see what people are doing so that we can figure out if we're doing this career right. We're looking for guideposts.
If we're doing it right.
Are we doing it at all? Is this how one does? And so, you know, we look to other authors for that, which is, I think, really healthy, but it's also can be really unhealthy and get a lot of those shoulds and those feelings of self-doubt and of not being good enough, imposter syndrome and all those things, because you feel like somebody else has got this all figured out. I can tell you, I bet nobody has this all figured out. We're all just figuring it out as we go. We're all just starting over again, getting back on our path with whatever gets us there and just continuing forward, right?
And a lot of us are doing that thing where we're trying to make it look like we got it all, even though everything's sort of fallen apart. And it's that duck gently going across the lake, even as its little feet are just right,
paddling like mad.
Yeah, and that's so many of us for very different various reasons, but that's it.
Yep. So I think those are some pretty good tips. I guess
probably have more, and I think we could throw some up more in a shorter video of just the top 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're hitting a long mark at this point. We've been at this for a while.
Yeah, this is a long video. So we should probably close this off. And we have yet to find a good way to close off other than saying, please subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. Hit the little like button. Yes. Thank you for coming. Hit that little thumb down there because that like button helps other people on YouTube find it. It's part of their algorithms and stuff. So, and that doesn't cost anything to hit the like button.
And subscribe.
Subscribe so that you hear when we put out our next video. Right now, and this might change, we are trying to get a video out every Tuesday. Now that might shift. Again, see, we got to make sure that we get our writing done, and this is part of it, but we want to make sure that we don't overschedule, right? But hopefully we will see you again next time.
And comments, please ask questions. We'd love to have questions that we can answer either down below or in our videos.
Yes, absolutely. So see you next time. Until then, happy reading, my friends.
Happy reading and happy writing.
Bye.